Hi, this is Adam Lance Garcia, and you're listening to the FSF PopCast.
Hello, guys, and welcome to the FSF PopCast. I am Tim. I am your host. This is the show that's made by nerds for nerds, and we are so glad to have you here today. Our guest is award-winning author and a screenwriter who's grew up on comics and lightsabers, and we're thrilled to have the author of the Green Lama Legacy, the Sons of Fire series, and he was a contributor to a recent Star Wars book called Return of Jedi from a certain point of view, and I'm really excited to talk to him about that. So, with no further ado, let's welcome to the show Adam Lance Garcia. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, very, very excited. Um, I mean, I say that in all honesty. The reason why anybody ever comes on the show is because either A, they've done something I really want to talk to them about, or I've stalked them just long enough on social media. I mean, researched them just long enough on social media for me to be like, they're really cool. I have to have them on the show. And you're a bit of both. So,
Well,
uh, yeah. So, out of all the people we've ever had on the show, I feel like this question was written so long ago, and we've used it with a bunch of different people. But I think that it was waiting for you to get here. This is like the Adam
no
Lance
pressure.
Garcia question. Yeah, exactly. No pressure whatsoever. Please don't bomb this because this is no kidding. Uh, but we're nerds here at this show, and we love a good origin story. So, in the origin story of Adam Lance Garcia, what are the influences that helped you be who you are today? What's your origin story? How'd you get here?
I mean, how did I get here? Well, I woke up. No, so my origin story actually is my father. My dad was a huge comic book collector. He just had hundreds of thousands of comic books. He loved the medium of comic books. He also loved movie serials. He raised me on Flash Gordon serials, really mostly Commander Cody, a lot of the B movies, Zorro, things like that. I grew up around sort of fan culture in the 80s and 90s, long before it became sort of the part of the zeitgeist. It was sort of like this other thing. But I was a second generation. My dad would put me to sleep telling me stories about Spider-Man and Superman. I loved
Nice.
Superman the movie. I called it Super S. I had like Spider-Man pajamas. My dad would like help me climb up the wall, when I was because I was Spider-Man. He would mess with my head and said like the giant globe in Queens, New York is actually in honor of Krypton. I don't know why he would lie to me like that, but also to this day I'm like, oh, that's Krypton.
That's awesome.
And so I grew up around comic books, comic book collecting, movie serials, movies, my whole life. And then I know I've said this before in other places, but like the first time I watched Star Wars, I don't remember when the first time I watched Star Wars was. I think it was Return of the Jedi. I'm just gonna say that is canon. That the first one I saw was Return of the Jedi, hot copied off HBO. That's an assumption because it just was always there. Um, and like I remember, like I have a vision of a very faded memory of like watching my dad like record it off of the TV. And it was there. It was always there. Then I started reading Star Wars books. I started reading like a lot of Redwall series. Um, Writing and reading and comic books and movies all became part of my life. And I have been very, very, very lucky to have taken those passions of my childhood and make it a career. That's not, it's uncommon. Um, and I'm every day increasingly appreciative of how lucky I have been. It's been a weird journey. So that is the shortest version of my origin story.
I like it. I can appreciate that. I know that for me, Return of the Jedi was the first
Yeah.
Star Wars movie that I saw. I was about 8 when that came out. So I remember going to the theater and seeing it at the theater. And then I remember my dad would go and rent laser discs on the weekend with the laser disc
Yeah.
player. And he would get Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. And, we'd watch those. You'd have to take off the laser disc and flip it over and put it back
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
So I have great memories of that. That was like on Friday night, like, oh, what movies is dad going to bring home tonight? We were all excited and I was always like, I hope he gets Star Wars again. Um,
Yeah.
and so and then, eventually, then it became, pirating them off of HBO when I found them there, record them on my VHS. So
Or that like the double VHS tape, like you rent them and then put one VHS in
yep,
and you just kind of record in the same time, which was
yep.
totally illegal, but everyone did it. So
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And you could put like, but you could put like the whole original trilogy on one. You know,
Yeah, if you did like that one, if you I forget how it was, like it was a certain speed
there,
of
there was a
recording.
feature that yeah, you click the button and it would
Yeah.
slow down the recording, and you could put them all on one
Yeah.
VHS, which was awesome. You know, because I think I wore out one as a kid, one VHS, and had to get a new one,
Yeah.
um, because
Still have I'm sorry, please.
no, no, yeah, you're fine. But yeah, yeah, I had to redo it a couple different times. You can't see them, but back over here, down there on the floor, there's my special edition DVDs, you know, with the
Nice.
bonus disc and everything down over there. And then I've got a VHS set. I think it's in a box just right over here. But yeah, I still have the VHS and the DVDs as you know, as
Yes.
all.
I was gonna say the same because like I still have the original like box set that came out with the Star Wars trilogy. Then I had the THX one. I still have that, and then I have a special edition VHS, and then I have like the widescreen DVD of the trilogy. And I have like multiple iterations
Mhm.
of like every time they release it. I have like the Blu-ray. I have the 4K.
Yeah,
It is one of those things where I'm just like every so often, like I really don't need these, but at this point, I'm like I have to have them. I mean, and I also will
exactly.
say like the VHSs were huge because like I've talked about this a lot at work, where my day job is I work at Condé Nast, and we recently did a video visiting a set of Bridgerton, and it was such an exciting thing for me because to the initial question of like my origin story, I loved watching like from Star Wars to Jedi. Like the making of Star Wars VHS that you or like it was like a special thing. It was on TV, but they
Right.
released it separately as a via back before we had DVD special features. Like we had like a standalone VHS just about how these movies were made. And those videos, there's two of them, were so crucial to like me wanting to be in entertainment. And because it's just like it was such magic the way these movies were made. Because
Hmm.
it's like, as much as I clearly love the storytelling and the galaxy of Star Wars, like what I loved learning was like how they did it. Like
Oh,
how did they
sure. Yeah.
make them, yeah, how was the magic done? It's like, oh, they actually filmed it's like this, and it's a painting, and they shot in this direction, so that way, and it blew my mind. And so I had the chance to do that recently, and for on my actual 40th birthday, we shot that, and it's like, looking back and be like, I got to do the thing that I was always a kid. I'm like, I always want to do this, and then I got to do it. It was cool. So yeah, so like those VHSs were crucial to my origin story.
That's awesome. Very cool. But hey, let's jump from that into you mentioned it a little bit, some of your personal work. Let's talk about some of your personal writings. You've got the Green Lama series.
Yep.
There's the Sons of Fire,
Yep.
Mystery Men, which by the way, you guys has nothing to do with the Ben Stiller movie. That's something different. And there's a bunch of other works. Because at first I
Yeah.
was like, "Ooh, Mystery Men, what's that about?"
Yeah.
And I was like expecting like the flatulent dude and all that, but it was not that. Uh, but the covers that I've seen, the artwork I've seen on the covers of these things, they make me think of the 1930s serials. And
100%.
yeah, they're the cover, the artwork is amazing on those, and so that's very very cool. But can you tell our audience about like the Green Llama series and
Sure.
where they can find their own copies and all that kind of stuff?
Oh, well, the Green Lama is a Buddhist superhero from the 1940s. My dad collected him. Again, I go back to my dad. I remember watching Phantom Menace on VHS, and he brought out, uh, the comic, and he's like, "Oh, Padme, look!" And he brings out Green Lama, and the Green Lama had a phrase, "Oh, Mane Padme Home," which is an actual Buddhist prayer, but he used it as like his calling sign. In some versions, it's like his Shazam. In some versions, it's sort of just like something to scare the villains. And this is, I think, back in 2008, maybe a little bit later. I my memory's a bit squirrely on when I got started on this, but I was at New York Comic Con. I was approached by an editor of a very small press, and they gave me a list of characters that they wanted to work with, and Green Llama was there. And I at the time we thought it was like public domain. He's not. He is owned by the Cross and the State, Kendall Foster Cross, who created him. There were pulp magazines, there was comics, there was a radio show, and I saw it and I was like, oh, this is a character that I could write something because it'll be something for my dad. Like I'll have like an honest connection with the character. And I what was going to be a one-off story became multiple novels, a bunch of novellas, a bunch of short stories. I'm working on my third novel at the moment, revising it for the third time, because writing is hard, and especially when you're doing the end of a trilogy, it's very hard, and especially when you're writing it over the course of nearly almost a decade at this point. Because I started it at one point and had to put it down to work on other projects, several Green Llama stories, novellas. So I've kind of been working on it off and on over the course of an extended period of time while doing a J job, while writing about a lot of other things. But yeah, the llama is a very important character to me. I look at him as like I got to write and I got to become a writer and improve as a writer in the public eye, which is not something a lot of people get to do. But he's Jethro Dumont. He is a Buddhist millionaire playboy who, after his parents died in a car accident in the 1940s, went to Tibet, gained mystical powers because it's the 40s, and the East was still Asia was still like this sort of land of mystery.
Sure.
There's a lot of like there's some things that haven't aged as well as others. But I found that there's a lot of really interesting things with the character, with his supporting cast that really meant a lot to me. They're very surprisingly progressive for the time, where you had these moments of character, like there's an advertisement for the war. It's like it doesn't matter what their last names were, they died and they're Americans. And there was a whole issue about how these white soldiers were being like racist to these black soldiers, and the Green Llama takes the soldier to like Germany and it's like, look, you're just as bad as Hitler. And like he goes against the KKK, and this is like before like it was before the war even started. So like lots of really interesting stuff that they did. And so I just found I gleaned onto him really well. And you know eh, yeah, it's the series has been really, really interesting. I've got to grow as a writer, as I mentioned, and it's the reason I got to write Star Wars. I mean, and not even a joke. Like, I my co-producer Steele Phillip Heck, who is one of my dearest friends, came to me a few years back and said, "Hey, Adam, do you know anyone who wants to do audio dramas?" And I'm a huge audio drama fan. I love audio dramas.
Yeah.
I listen to Big Finish podcast, Big Finish Productions all the time. I'm a huge
Nice.
Doctor Who fan. So that's a different conversation. But like, I loved audio dramas, and I really wanted to do it. And we did a couple seasons of some other shows like Queens of the Sapphire Sea. I'm like, hey, I really want to do a Green Llama audio drama because there was a radio show back in the day in the 1940s, 1949 actually. There's almost a TV show. But I'm like, hey, I really want to do this. So we did a season of it, and because of that season of the audio drama, Lucasfilm heard it and they're like, hey, we want you to work with us. So I owe so much to the Green Llama, which is part of the reason why the third novel's taken so long. It's like I have to do it right. If I don't do it right, like I feel like I've failed him because he's done so much for me, and it's all again because my dad was like, "Hey, Padme, like the movie, in Star Wars."
That's very
Yeah,
cool. That's a really cool tie into your uh your growing up and your dad. And
yeah.
yeah, that's just a really neat story. I now before having done any research on you, and I saw that you had this thing called the Green Lama series, I was just like, oh, he created a superhero. That was my original thought, because
Yeah,
I did not know of the Green Llama of way back
he's
when I
very
saw
small.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so I had to look him up a little bit. But yeah, and now, in all fairness and all honesty, I have not read the Green Llama series yet.
how
I'm
dare
getting
you?
there. Yeah, I know, I'm a jerk.
No, it's
But I'm
okay.
getting there. I'm getting there.
There's some
Uh,
books that are better than others. I'm gonna be honest. Like I think some of the stories have aged better than others. I definitely look at my like I. It's weird. I had some friends read it recently, and I'm like, I've gotten better. I promise. I mean, this is I'm 41 now. Um, I'm looking at like stuff that I wrote when I was 20, and obviously like it did pay off. Like I have a career now, like as a writer. But it's interesting, like going back to those and being like, oh yeah, there was something there's something good there. There was something interesting in those books. But at the same time, I'm like, I'd love to George Lucas it up and like edit it. I had the chance once with one of my novels where I got to like revise it a bit and just improve things here and there. But like, I think they're good. There's some that are better than others. I think Sherlock Holmes and the Green Lama, the Heir Apparent, is one of my favorites. Just because, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here, but like the
Please
reason
do.
why that one is one of my favorites is because my publisher, Moonstone, Joe Gentel, uh, was like, "Hey, we want more people to learn about the llama. Can you do like a Sherlock Holmes Green Lama crossover?" And I was like, "That's a terrible idea." And he had suggested like having them solve a mystery in two different time periods, and I was like, "That's not really interesting. Like, if I'm gonna have a Sherlock Holmes Green Lama novel, like I want them to meet." And I found sort of like a really interesting loophole, which was in the canon of the Green Lama, the original pulp stories. They're all adaptations of monographs that were by Jethro Dumont. So Jethro Dumont wrote monographs, gave them to the writer, the fictionalized version of the writer. So Kendall Foster Crossan wrote under the name Richard Foster, and Richard Foster is a character in the pulps. And so so like the idea is like he's adapting these stories into pulp novels. So I'm like, well, in the canon of Sherlock Holmes, everything's written from Watson's perspective. So if
Right.
Dumont is the Watson of the story, and there's so many stories of like an older Sherlock Holmes. I'm like, okay, so it's plausible for him to have been alive and like at like 80 something in 1930 something. It was 1935. So that I had this, and like that's also when Jethro's like coming back from Tibet. So I'm like, oh, he has to stop in London, and he had an adventure in London with an elderly Sherlock Holmes, and became this really interesting story of sunrise, sunset of like it's the sunset of this hero and the sunrise of another one. I don't kill Sherlock Holmes off, spoilers, because I was like I can't do that. Like that's a different story. I felt like I don't have the right to do that. Um, I think a better writer
Sure.
can do that. I also felt like it was just I really liked the friendship, and I like that I kind of got around. Like I don't need to write like Crossan, or I don't need to write like Doyle. I can write like myself. I can give him his own voice. It just became a really interesting dynamic. So yeah, it's one of my favorites. I really love Crimson Circle, the second novel. Um, but yeah, it's so yeah, when you do read it, it's just like there's some that might not work, some that do. They might be all brilliant. They might be all Pulitzer winning stories that no one's read. But they're it's always interesting, like especially now at the tail end of it. At the end of this arc that I've been writing for God knows how long, it is weird, like revisiting story point beats and like, yeah, I don't know, I didn't know what I was doing back then, and I'm gonna try to pay it off. Um, Oh, and there's also the audio drama. Yeah, like if you just want to listen to the audio drama, like that's a standalone piece, like that, and it's free. It's on all your favorite podcast
Woo.
aggregators. Like it's a good one. But yes, so that's my monologue.
I
Thank you for
like it.
listening.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was just looking that up. It's available on Audible. So 9 episodes right there.
Yeah, it's a trailer and 8 episodes. And the eighth
Okay.
episode is produced in Dolby Atmos, so definitely listen to it with headphones on. Um, I that's one of those things that like God's honest truth, like I'm so proud of that podcast. I hope to do a second season. When that will happen is a different story. But that audio drama opened up. It gave me Star Wars. It gave me the project I'm working on right now. Um, it is. I mean, part of it is I had a great director. Steel Philpack was the director. We had an amazing sound designer, and amazing music by Brian Matolius, which is just so good. John Marcus Aresi was played Jethro. Sarah Smith then played uh, the Riveter. It's I'm really proud of that one. Like, and it's free. So if you're like, I want to check out this guy's Adam's work and not have to spend any money, you can listen to Green Llama on Audible.
There you go. All right. Yeah, I'm gonna have I definitely I just clicked the follow button. We're gonna listen to that one here in a
Damn
little bit.
straight.
Yeah, damn Skippy. We're gonna check that one out. All right, very cool. Yeah, I'm excited to hear that. Now I've had the pleasure of interviewing many authors on this show, and I've come to learn, or at least understand, or at least I think I'm learning to understand, that authors, in my opinion, are a bit like snowflakes. No two are the same. And especially when it comes to their process and how they come about doing their work and and everything else. So, what is Adam Lance Garcia's process for writing? Do you have a process? And if so, what is it?
Pain. Uh,
Agony, suffering,
no, it's
confusion,
interesting.
mental torture.
Confusion, mental torture. Like I'm still learning what my process is. A lot of what I did in my initial work, and I think you can see it in the quality of my writing, was sort of is what's called pantser, where you're just kind of writing as like figuring out the story as you go. What
Hmm.
I've done increasingly is write out treatments as much as I can, understand details as much as I can, and break those things down. I tend to focus on a lot on dialogue when I do prose, and then go back and sort of fill in the details. I tend to write audio dramas and scripts really quickly because it's all dialogue. Dialogue is where I'm strongest. Um, you know, so I tend to use those as like the way to sort of guide me. The characters guide me in the story, and sometimes that's actually a mistake. And I think that's it can be sort of like um they're leading you and you realize like, oh, I've now kind of completely off track of what I planned. Um, but yeah, I'll write treatments, I'll write outlines. I'm trying to use something called Story Genius, which is something that Delilah Dawson taught me about, which is like breaking the scenes down even more,
Hmm.
so that way, like, it's a lot more like front loading your writing process, so that when you write it, it's a lot quicker. I need to get better at that because I'm impatient because I'm like, I just want to write. I just want to write the dialogue. I just want to write these characters. Um, but also like I'm getting better at taking notes. Like my novel, one of the novels I'm working on right now, I gave it to my agent and he broke down like, hey, this is a really interesting story. And this is really good, but you need to like, you're focusing on the wrong character. Like this is your main character, which means I have to like restructure when I'm writing. Um, and that's daunting in its way, but what is my process? I have not really answered that question.
Okay.
Um, I think it is kind of like there's I'm always thinking of stories like constantly. A lot of things are sometimes they're based on dreams, sometimes they're just based on interactions. I do kind of keep a running catalog of ideas that I've always wanted to kind of revisit. Sometimes it's like, how do I want to deal with this emotion or this relationship, or how do I explore that in a way that I can sort of see outside myself? Because I can't really write stuff that's about myself. I can't write like in the first person. I can't write things that are nonfiction when it comes to me because I can't see outside myself. I kind of get this
Fair.
weird tunnel vision when I do it. But I can write about like feelings of loss, as I did with my Star Wars story and Dexter Jester. It's a lot of like me dealing with like, how do you feel about celebrating these amazing moments when the person you want to be there or the people that you want to be there celebrating are gone? um those emotions I can sort of put, well, Dexter can feel it, I can show that through Dexter. So I find all these different ways
Okay.
of finding those stories, and then I'll write a treatment, and then I'll just start like, when I feel like the story's in a good enough place, I'll start writing as much as I can. It depends on like whether it's prose, whether it's comics like Sons of Fire. I've been pantsing that one for years. But it's funny, like every time I pants it, I go back and I look at like my original outline. It's very close to what I was doing. There was actually like volume 3. I'm sorry, I'm just ranting right now.
Oh, you're doing
But
great.
my but volume 3 basically is like Sons of Fire is a comic about so this is a good okay, here's a really good example about my writing process.
All right.
So when I was a kid, I remember that I was about 12. I remember I thought I saw outside my school bus window what looked like the Shazam like lightning bolt in the sky. And I thought about like, well, what would it be like to have superheroes in the real world? And now like this is long before shows like the boys,
Mhm.
Supernat um Unbreakable. Like it was long before these kinds of stories were out, but it was something that I
Right.
was really intrigued by. And as the story developed in my mind, I was like, well, what if my best friend was a superhero? How would I feel about that? And initially, it became like, will it would be terrifying. Like if I found out that like someone close to me was something more than human. And the story evolved. I started writing as a novel, didn't really work, and then I was like, let me do it with a comic book." And I'm working with this amazing artist, Heidi Black, and they are just phenomenal. But like, I wrote these pages out. The first two volumes are almost like um, uh, stream of consciousness. Like I'm just writing it out as the story comes to me. But then we sat down years later and I'm like, all right, this is volume three. We just kind of talked it out. This is volume four, talked out like all the beats that we want to hit. And that's the end of the story. And I wrote it out. I wrote a treatment. And then I was like, all right, I'm gonna write volume three. I'm just gonna write it now because I'm ready. And I wrote like 135, 150 pages in like a month. It's the fastest I've ever written anything in my entire life.
Oh, wow.
Um, and it flowed out of me, and then I looked at my treatment that I had not looked at the entire time I was writing. It was the exact same story, like
Oh, that's
beat for
cool.
beat. It was weird. It was a weird. It's, and even now, like I'm working on an audio drama where I'm like, I wrote out like an outline for the series, an outline for the episode, and then I'm like writing the episode, and it's diverging, and then you look at it, and you're like, no, it's exactly the story I wanted to tell. So I sort of even the Green Lama book. Has diverged significantly from my original treatment, but the same beats keep on getting hit. I keep on hitting the same story beats that I want to. Whether I'm succeeding in those is a different story.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, that's cool. Yeah, I I think a lot of the authors that I've talked to, you'd be surprised how many do actually pants it. And it's just,
E-
and they talk about the same thing. We're like, well, I sat down and I did write an outline of where I wanted the story to
Yeah,
go, and then they forget about either they forget about the outline, or
yeah,
it's there but they just don't look at it. It's
yeah,
just kind of there, kind of off to the side, and the story just progresses naturally. And
yeah,
because they've already written it out in their head through the outline, so when they sit down to write it, it's just writing, and it just kind
yeah,
of flows out of them. So I kind of think that that's maybe what you were describing as well, is that in those couple instances, is that you had the outline, it just flowed out of you the same. I think it's kind of
yeah.
cool. So
It's it's stressful though. It's like I think writing is one of the. I'm very lucky in my life and the with what my day job is. But, like, I'll never be as happy as I am or stressed as I am when I'm writing. It's like I spent most of today working a big portion of today working on, this script, and it's both, like, incredibly fun, but incredibly frustrating the entire time. And I would not exchange it for anything in the entire world.
I the only way that I can relate to that is I recently wrote a review article of something, and I have a very strong, I don't want to be negative
Mhm.
when anything that I write. I very much don't want to be negative about the product, the person, um, if it's a group of people that I'm talking about in fandoms or anything. I try very, very hard not to be negative, because there's enough of that out there, and all those
Yeah.
things. But I was writing a less than favorable review on something,
Mhm.
and I beat myself up on this review for weeks. Like, I rewrote it like 3 times, because I was like, I can't turn that in. There's no way I can turn that in. If I turn that in, I'm a
Yeah.
jerk.
Yeah.
And that was the most stressed I have ever been in my couple years of writing. Just I literally was like sitting up at night in my recliner with my laptop on on my lap,
Yeah.
and in a dark room, just me and the glow of the laptop typing away and going, and then then just hitting the backspace beat. No, 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 no. You know. Um but yeah, and it actually, so I turned it in, and uh my editor loved it. He was like, "Yeah, this is a great article." And I'm like, "Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, thank, thank you, baby Jesus. Thank you, Jewish God. Thank you." Yeah, yeah. That was highly, highly stressful for me. Um, but yeah, next article I jump back to something I was more comfortable with. So yeah, that's how you do it. So that's enough about me. We're talking about you. So let's talk about you a little bit more. And something, one of the reasons why I mentioned pre-show that I wanted to have you on the show is that I have been enjoying following you on socials for quite some time. Now,
Always a
originally,
mistake.
yeah, probably.
Always a mistake.
But I think that I got onto your socials because after having interviewed Kristen Baver,
Who
uh,
is the
I,
best?
Kristen's amazing, isn't she?
I mean,
Um,
look, we can just talk about how great Kristen is. I mean, that I can do that for days. I mean,
right.
she's
That's part two of
one of my
this
dearest
podcast
friends.
is
Yeah, exactly.
the
The
awesome
Kristen Baber
Kristen hour.
hour. Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, when we had her on the show, I was like, "Yeah, don't worry, we don't go any longer than this." She's like, "Oh, great," because the one time I ended up on this podcast, it was like 3 hours. I'm like, "Yeah, we're not going to get anywhere." We were like almost 2 hours. I'm like, "I am so sorry," but we were just talking and having such a
Yeah.
great time, with conversation that, yeah. Next thing I knew, it was like done. And but yeah, had an awesome, awesome interview with her. Kristen is just, she's she's amazing, and
Yes.
I've floated a few things over to her, just as, hey, looking for some feedback on something. What do you think? And she's been kind enough to respond to me, and let me use her as a sounding rod, which was amazing. Um,
She's also someone, if you ever need to, like, bury a body, like, she will keep a secret. Like, I had no idea literally, like, I had no idea that she was in, from a certain point of view, Return of the Jedi with me until, like, it was freaking announced. And I'd like I wanna say this, like, I talk to Kristen daily, if not, like, multiple times a week, and I had no idea. So
that's
I just
fantastic.
I just decided that, like, if I ever need to bury a body, I will have Kristen Baver help me out
Kristen
with
is the
that.
one. She is the one.
She's the
Yeah.
one, she's the one, yeah. I'm forever impressed because, yeah, I told her that I was in it because I was so excited, and I'm like, "Well, I can tell her she's at Lucasfilm. I don't feel like it's she's gonna know anyway."
Right. Yeah.
And she didn't tell me anything.
That's awesome. Yeah, I found you because I think you and her had interacted on one of the socials, and I was like, "Oh, who's this Adam Lance Garcia guy?" And I started checking you out from there, and I was like, "Oh, he's pretty cool." So I followed you, and then I followed
Yeah.
you on a couple other socials, and I really started enjoying your approach, really, to everything, but Star Wars in particular. And having talked with you a little bit more today, I get to see where some of that comes from and your basis in Star Wars and what Star Wars means to you. And so that's kind of exciting for me because that's I like to know what makes people tick.
Yeah.
But on that note, let's talk about the lightning rod that is in the social community right now, and that is called the Acolyte. That's a Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the brand new show from
Yeah.
Lucasfilm, and it's on Disney Plus. It's streaming right now. So far, 5 episodes of the 8 are out. What
Mhm.
are your thoughts on the show thus far?
I'm really enjoying it, and like, is it perfect? No, but at the same time, it does what I've always wanted Star Wars to do, for a very long time. I think, I'm a huge EU fan. I'm not sure, you can't really see it because this is an audio medium, unless you can see into my soul, or if this, even if
This
now, like, we're
this will
watching
be
this
on
on
video as
YouTube.
well.
This will be on YouTube. Excellent. So you can see behind me here.
Yeah.
These are my canon books. In here in this closet are all of my EU books. I have an entire collection of expanded universe novels. Um, the funny thing is, like, when we got this house, I went to my parents' house where I had all of my books, like all my canon books, all my EU books, and my girlfriend was very kind and helped me move. And then she saw me just open up all the little like shelves, and she's like, "I didn't realize how many you had." Uh, I I I did not understand how many there were. I'm like, "Yeah, there's a lot." It literally like, it's so many. I have not a complete collection, but a near complete collection of the EU. Um, but now we joke it's research. Like, now I'm like, "Yeah, it's research now. Ha, 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 ha.
There you go.
I proved you wrong." Not her, she believed me, but I feel like my, like, girlfriends in, like, high school, she's like, "Well, Star Wars, what do you need to know that for?" I'm like, "Ha ha." Anyway,
Gotcha.
gotcha. So it's funny because, like, so growing up, I loved what I loved about the EU was that it was expansionary. That I loved that I got to see more stories about Luke and Leia and Han. And then we got to meet their kids, Jason, Jaina, and Anakin. And then the new Jedi Order comes in and like completely changes the status quo. And then like everything, like just it was interesting, like seeing more of the galaxy.
Mhm.
And then we started seeing with the prequels and sort of going backwards in time. We had like the Old Republic, and we had the Dawn of the Jedi. We got to see like how big the galaxy actually was. Um, but with the EU also came some limitations. Like the EU in post Return of the Jedi was always like Luke, Han, and Leia had to survive. That was the mandate. Like anything else can happen, but Luke, Han, and Leia had to survive. There was also this aspect of kind of because they had to survive, they became had a lot of plot armor. They had a lot of plot armor around them, but also which meant that they sort of like had a lot of power creep. They became increasingly more powerful. And while that's really cool, and I know as a kid I loved it, like I still think to this day of like in the Thrawn trilogy when Luke like takes his lightsaber and like slides down the side of a building on Coruscant. Like that's just cool.
Right.
Or like when he becomes like the Palpatine's apprentice in Dark Empire. All these different things where you saw like these, like you got to see him at his best and his baddest asses. But I think what always there like as far as exploratory as that era was for as weird as it got, like just think about like the Crystal Star and Wuru, and the again the Yuuzhan Vong and the New Jedi Order, and I haven't read Legacy of the Force yet because like it came out like when I was like not reading as much, but like what happens with I think it's Abeloth, I think that's her name. It
Yeah.
got weird. Like a lot of weird stuff happens in
Mhm.
in the EU, but it always sort of like always hewed either to like the binary of rebels versus imperials, the binary of the Jedi versus the Sith. And when it wasn't that, it was the Yuuzhan Vong, or if Troy Denning was writing, it was ants. For some reason, he loved ants. There was always, and there's also like a lot of like, if for again, it felt weird, but it felt safe. What I loved
Sure.
about a lot of the things in the canon, and what I love, and I've said this to the folks at Lucasfilm, and I say this as someone I want to be very clear on this. Like, yes, I've written for Star Wars, and it is the greatest privilege of my life. It is a dream come true, and I pray to God that everyone gets to experience what I got to experience with writing Star Wars because it was everything I wanted it to be and more. And that the fact that I got to do it as someone who grew up with the EU, who is like the reason I started writing was because of the EU, to like live to that dream is just so wonderful, and I am so lucky, and I hope everyone gets to get that because it's the best feeling in the world. So I want to be clear when I say this, like, yes, I've done that, but like as a fan, the High Republic is what I wanted from the EU in a lot of ways, where it doesn't feel safe. It feels incredibly expansionary. I feel like every time I pick up a new High Republic book, I'm learning something new about the galaxy. Um, in phase two, you have the path of the open hand, and I love that how that and the convocation of the force and how that completely reshapes your understanding of what the force is. There are multiple religions. One thing that the EU had a couple of examples. I can't remember them off the top of my head. There were a couple of examples of like other Force religions, but generally it was the Jedi and the Sith. And now the High
Right.
Republic has, again, that path of open hand, and others at the convocation of the Force were like, or the Church of the Force that was first introduced in the Force Awakens. You have this aspect of like their understanding of the Force is different, and it
Right.
adds like this interesting nuance to the universe. The other thing that I love about it with the High Republic is like you get to see the Jedi at their height, and then you get to see that in context with the prequels when they're basically at their nadir, when they're about to be destroyed, and it makes that fall even more tragic. Um, the more content we get, it gives us more context to the universe. And again, like
Exactly.
I think what was like missing, like as much as I want to be very clear, as much as I love Knights of the Old Republic, and like the Darth Revan, his or their story, what I really loved about like the even like the non Jedi, again, it was very uh, I'm listening to iJedi literally today, and they talk about Nomi Sonrider from the EU. And it's again, it's like the Sith Wars. It was always the Jedi versus Sith, and the High Republic
Hmm.
introduced this idea of like, well, there are other challenges out there that aren't just the Jedi and the Sith. It adds so much to the universe. So then when I go
Right.
into the Acolyte, it was like it was again. What I loved about the sequel trilogy is like seeing this last adventure with these our friends, I and like seeing that next generation, that like that handoff, the stuff that like really made the EU, the post original Jedi era, like so exciting for me. That sort of pass off of generations.
Sure. Sure.
Um, but I feel like there's only like other media like they do go back to the well of the original trilogy a lot, for obvious reasons. So there are still stories there to tell. There's also the interesting seating period between 6 and 7, like what happened, and sort of like the rise of the First Order. That's interesting. And there's also the war period between the Clone Wars and the 3 and 4. Like those are all interesting. But what the High Republic does is like, okay, this is more. This is like we have 25,000 years of history. We don't need to just focus on this like these 70-year period. Like it's interesting as a 70-year period obviously is, because we keep on going back. We have thousands of years in any direction. Like any direction that we can go and find out more and discover things. But then we have
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of
Absolutely.
planets. So with the Acolyte, to your question, which you asked maybe 35 minutes ago, is that
34. Well, you're fine.
34, fine. 34 in 30 seconds. What I like about it is that it's the first time I'm getting a live action, EU story. The first time I'm seeing something outside of the familiar. In some ways, I feel like Andor is kind of the exception that proves the rule, where it's just like, I think there's only so many stories you can tell in the rebellion period, and then Andor comes in, you're like, oh, well, this is interesting. This is a new
Yeah.
take on that narrative.
Yeah.
Acolyte's one
Absolutely.
of the in my mind is very much up there of like, well, let us see the Jedi. Are they discovering the Sith? Are they not? Like even like May and Osha, and how that complicates the chosen one myth, which ties into Yoda saying like, a prophecy which has been misread may have been in episode 3. Like all these new complications, you know, I get to watch it. I'm like, oh, this changes how I view the story. And I'm surprised. Like that's the thing that I want. Like the thing that I love about Star Wars is because it is in a completely original medium. It is not an adaptation of anything that's ever,
Right.
it's not a Lord of the Rings adaptation, as much as those great as those films are, or even a Star Trek. Like it's this myth that we're discovering with that alongside the characters. Um, so I like it when I'm surprised. And like this last episode, episode 5, at the day of recording, like I was shocked. Like, I mean, spoilers if you haven't watched it. Like, by this point,
Oh my
if you
God.
have, like, yeah, they kill they have like all the red shirt Jedi. We're like, well, they're totally gonna get killed, and like you think like the surprise is finding out who the stranger is, and like we all kind of knew it was Chimere, but then it's like, oh, we're gonna kill off Jecki and Yord. like two of our main characters in the
Yeah.
most brutal fashion, like, and you're only just like you're like not even a full like 2/3 of the way through the series, and it's nice being surprised. And I think that's the greatest thing about the Acolytes. Like, I don't know where the story's gonna go. I don't know who's gonna survive. Everything about it um is adding new context to the story that I already knew.
Oh, for sure.
Um
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm fascinated by it. Like, I'm excited by it. Like, I've been thinking about like this week's episode every 5 minutes. Like, listening to podcasts about it. So I want to hear more about it. Um
Yeah.
so the answer to your question is like, do I have notes or some criticisms? Yes, but overall, I'm excited. I'm just excited and I'm enjoying the ride.
I feel much the same way. I think to be a Star Wars fan, we talked about this pre-show. It's okay to be critical.
Yeah.
That's part of the gig because it's something you hold dear. It's something that's special and important to you. So it's one thing to be critical of it. Um, but even in the shows and things that I don't necessarily care for, and I'm not going to go into those, but I still find I've always looked or tried to find the silver lining in things. So even if it's a show that I don't appreciate 100%, there are things about that show that I still really like.
Yeah.
And I have my struggles with a couple different Star Wars things. And that's just the way it is. But that's
Yeah.
part of the being in the fandom. But I have one of the things that I have always liked is when we get away from the Skywalker name
Mhm.
and the stories that are outside of the Skywalker name. And so for me, I was very excited about this show when it was announced for two reasons. Number one, it was away from the Skywalker name.
Yep.
And number two, we were going to get a story mostly from what I was hoping for. And it hasn't really happened that way, but it is kind of from the Sith point of view.
Yeah.
I want a Sith centered story. I really do. I think it'd be very cool in Star Wars to see a Sith point of view because everything that we see in through the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, the sequel trilogy is always from the Jedi point of view. It's always
Yeah.
from the good guy point of view. I would love to see some of these very same stories, but from the other side of the fence and how they were going about it and all these
Yeah.
different things. That's just me though, just because I think the Sith are cool and for various reasons. Uh, but I've liked this show so far because a lot of the same things you just I don't feel like anybody's safe.
Yeah.
I don't feel
Really
uh,
refreshing.
yeah, it is. I don't know that even like I really like Master Soul, but I don't think he's gonna make it through the series. I really don't.
But if he doesn't
Um,
make it to the series, like, if he survives, like, I feel like our understanding of him is gonna be completely changed. I
I do
think that's
too,
like
especially
yeah,
I think whatever airs in the next episode is really going to change our perspective and view of Master Soul.
yep,
Um, but I look at the series and I'm like, cool, it's new places, new people, new things, and I think that's with all the hubbub that's gone around this. It hasn't changed the lore, it hasn't broken canon, it
mhm.
hasn't done all these things that people are claiming that it's doing. I think people just need to be patient with it because they're trying to judge the whole meal before everything is cooked.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Mundi, like, in quotes, controversy is a good example of that, where it's just
Oh,
like,
for
I
sure.
remember watching that and like, "Oh, he was alive then, that's cool." That adds an interesting complication because it's like, he has to, at the end of the story, think the Sith have been extinct for millennia. He has to believe that. Yoda and Mace might not because they do share that look, just like how Obi-Wan has like that slight pause in A New Hope and how that was a retcon to him telling a lie about Vader.
Mhm.
Like, you can read, there's a lot you can read into that look, but Mundi has to be wrong, or he has
Correct.
to be lying. So I think when I saw that, I'm like, "Oh, this means something. That's not put there just for a cameo."
Right. And that's
It's a very
yeah.
yeah,
That's the same way I looked at it as well. I'm like, there's purpose behind him being there.
yeah,
It's not just oh, like because they had if they were going to pull anybody for a cameo, they could have pulled anybody. They could have put
oh
Yoda in
yeah,
there if they really wanted to. They could have done anything. They choose Kiadi Mundi for a reason,
yeah,
and we'll find out what that reason is. But we're all, when he showed up in the series, I'm like, come on, guys, it's episode 4. You're not
yeah.
even halfway through. Take a breath. Take a beat.
I yeah, and it's a similar thing with, like, the 3rd episode where, like, there's a lot of I thought it was interesting, like, I thought it was really interesting because again, to our earlier, like, discussion about, like, or my monologue. Like I really like the sort of like nuances in the force of like
Yeah, the
understanding
thread.
there are other force relations. So like in seeing that, like they see it as the thread. That's fascinating. And again, how it adds complications to the chosen one mythos, or the chosen one prophecy is interesting. But then it's like I'm media literate enough. I'm like, this is from May's perspective, or no,
Mhm.
from Osha's perspective. We've only seen half the story. Why are we only seeing this half of the story at this point? That's like
May's
clearly thought out. Yeah.
yeah, May's
Osha is
perspective is coming.
yeah,
So,
May's perspective is coming. Exactly. So it's like I think that there is it's just interesting. Like again, like I like that I'm watching every episode and I do not know what's going to happen. Um
yeah, I
I,
like
I
having I like having the mystery,
yeah.
you know,
I think
because
it's
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, you no, please.
I was because even like with Ahsoka and the Mandalorian rather, going into those, they're going to survive through those episodes because they
Yeah.
have to. They're,
Yeah.
but we're 5 episodes in, and when I still can't tell you who I think the title character is. Because
Exactly.
it's the acolyte, but who's the acolyte?
Yeah.
I don't think it's May. Could it
Yeah,
be
it
Osha?
might could be
It might
OSHA,
be.
could be Soul,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah. There's so much where I'm going. I love the fact that I'm watching the series. I don't know where it's going. I'm on episode 5 had me literally, quite literally on the edge of my seat,
It
gasping
was
a couple different times
a
because
great episode. So sorry, I cursed. It
yeah,
was a
yeah,
great episode. It's a
it
great
really
episode.
it really was. And I think honestly the lightsaber fights in that episode were probably the best that I've seen since the Phantom Menace.
Yeah,
Um
I mean, I think it's my favorite since, Snoke's throne room.
oh yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah, there's that too. That's
because
a really good one.
and that's a really good one, and it's similar sort of thing, like, I always like, The Last Jedi to this day is gonna be controversial. It's gonna be controversial until, like, 20 years when everyone grows up and everyone agrees that's the best one, just like it happened with Phantom Menace. I'm old enough I remember how these things go.
Oh
I
yeah.
was there.
Menace
Yeah,
was
no.
hot
I
hot fire for a while.
Oh my
Whew.
god, I always there's that like that Elrond meme of like I was there when like it would don't quote old magic to me. It was like no, it's at like I was
I
there
know
four
what you mean
thousand
though,
years
yeah.
ago. Yeah, it was like I was there 4,000 years ago, and also like there's the Aslan from and it's just like don't quote old magic to me, which like I was there when it was written. Um so like yeah, what I like the why The Last Jedi is so like top tier for me is the same reason why Acolyte is so interesting to me, why Andor is really interesting to me. Why like a lot of like my favorite thing about like the first season of Mandalorian was like the reveal of the Baby Yoda, Grogu,
Yeah.
as we know. I and it goes back to like I'm like I don't know where the story's going. I remember like when the moment like Snoke got like cut in half and and Rey catches the lightsaber and they go back to back. I saw it and I was like, lots of expletives of like, how is this going to go? Like, I don't know where this story is going now. And partly because I mean, like, as a writer and as someone who reads and consumes media a lot for a living, like, you get used to knowing where the story goes.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, to your point, like you watch Ahsoka, Ahsoka's gonna make it. You watch the Mandalorian, Mandalorian's gonna make it. Um, but like, yeah, like I like that, like there's a show out there that like I just don't know what's gonna happen. I think a great example is sort of like a different. It's in Andor, but it's another example of like surprising me in a different way. And I always think about Mon Mothma. Like I look at Mon Mothma as one of the best uses of of a legacy character in a
Mhm.
new series, because her inclusion in that series could have been like as this shining beacon of light as we kind of always imagined her to be. But what it does is it shows her home life to be just garbage.
Oh
A
yeah.
terrible
Yeah.
husband, like a really awful daughter, and like the audience is this really interesting dramatic irony of like she is doing her best to make a better world for her daughter and her husband could not care less.
Yeah, they couldn't give
And
2
they
craps.
and they look at her disdain, and it adds so much more nuance. So like when I would see scenes with her, I'm like, I don't know where this is gonna go. I like that, and I like that out of a TV show. I like that out of movies. And to the earlier point, like that's what I think Star Wars can do, really more than any other franchise. Like I mentioned Star Trek very quickly, but like you know, at the end of the day, you kind of know that the bridge crew's going to survive. It's sort of like you're sort of like, how are they going to get out of it? Like, I love Doctor Who, um, but there's always going to be an element like the Doctor is going to survive. With
Right.
Star Wars, I think anyone should die. There was a Hello Greedo video that he did years and years and years and years ago, and also Patrick Willems did something similar, where I think they make a really good point of like, just because it's important to you, the audience, doesn't mean it's important to the universe. Um,
Right.
and I think that's like the best Star Wars is like, it's not it like it plays it surprising. Like I always, I do say like the reason why The Empire Strikes Back is my favorite of the series. I think like A New Hope and Return of the Jedi are more enjoyable watches, if that makes sense. Like they're more fun
Hmm.
to watch and revisit. But Empire Strikes Back to me is what defines Star Wars, in that you go in with this one expectation of the story and you leave with something completely different. And that happens to the characters. Like they all go in like, we're the good guys and we're all going to survive, and it's great. And then at the end of it, they're like, Luke lost his hand, he is the scion of basically the devil.
Hmm.
Han Solo's frozen in carbonite, everything's got terrible. I mean, I think, and everyone in that movie loses arguably, because Vader doesn't win either. um you just you are able to go through a story and like be legitimately shocked.
Yeah.
um and that, yeah, and again, like going back to the acolyte of it all, it's just like it was thrilling to watch, but it really made me sit up when I was like, hey, you just pulled some really bold narrative choices. Like, yeah, like just killing off Jackie the way they did. um
York's
like
death. Oof.
Your Yeah, but, like, both of them were terrible. I think what's was harsh about, like, Jackie was that you have this, like, thrilling moment of seeing her, like, actually stand her ground for, like, a hot minute, and then just being not just killed, but then, like, killed, like, stabbed again twice, and you're like, "Okay," like, you are going like, it just yeah, I don't think there's maybe Game of Thrones could do something like this.
Yeah.
But again, like, those are adaptations. So, I think that there's a surprise. So,
I agree. Yeah. So yeah, guys, if you haven't watched Acolyte yet because you've listened to the world around you and the hubbub going, please give it a chance. And give it a chance. Watch all the episodes, and the meal needs to get finished getting cooked. And I'm hoping that there's a second course coming because of how great this first season has been. I've been very very happy with it. Um, but let's wrap this up. I got one final question for you, Adam.
sure.
All right, we call this our silly question. We started asking this because
Yeah.
my co-host, who couldn't be here today, Kathleen, has a 5-year-old daughter, and her daughter got asked this question one day, but Kathleen didn't, and Kathleen was like, "Well, this is just rude. Nobody asked me, and I have an answer." So here it is. Adam Lance Garcia, what's
Yes.
your favorite dinosaur?
Brontosaurus. I always really like
That
the
was quick.
long. Yeah. You expected that quick.
No, no, no. Usually people are like, let's see. Oh boy, but dinosaurs. Yeah, I used to like.
Uh, I always like the Brontosaurus. I just love the long neck. They're just always my favorites. As long I even like when they got like the wrong head at some
Yeah,
point. Yeah, always been my favorite. And then I
very
also like. I
cool.
mean, I do like Triceratops. Those are fun. Stegosauruses. You might not. You might remember this. There was a TV show like Dino Wars or something like that, where like people
Hmm.
like it was like. And I love like the Stegosaurus in like like it was not a Stegosaurus, but like they had like the pilot on the other side of like this like on the of the bony stuff. But yeah, Brontosaurus for sure.
All right, very cool. Yeah, that was a good answer. That was quick. All right. Well, Adam, thank you so much for being on our show today. Where can our listeners go to find out more about you, your works, what you got coming up that you can talk about?
Well, you can follow me on all the socials at Adam Lance Garcia. Just basically everything from Hive to Instagram to Threads to I do have a Twitter account, but it's kind of inactive. I'm on Facebook. There is a TikTok account, but I do feel like Steve Buscemi whenever I go on TikTok. I'm like, how do you do, fellow kids? Um, and I do have a website. I need to update it, but you can find a lot of my books on Amazon. Just type in Adam Lance Garcia. The most recent thing that was published, as mentioned, is my very first Star Wars, which is in Star Wars from a certain point of view, Return of the Jedi. It is the veteran. It is the end of the celebration on Coruscant after the second destruction of the second Death Star from Dexter Jester's point of view, which was a very deep poem. I don't think, and literally no one expected me to do that, and it's still the coolest thing I've ever done. You can listen to the Green Lama on your favorite podcast app. All 8 episodes of the first season are streaming right now. You can buy a lot of the Green Lama novels, which I feel like I've sold very, very well in this interview on Amazon or your favorite local bookstore or directly from moonstonebooks.com. Sons of Fire, you can buy the first 2 volumes on Amazon, and we are working on volume 3, and we're shopping it around to publishers. My agent's being very patient. I can't say that I'm working on an original novel. It is a murder mystery that I can say. I am working on an audio drama. I cannot say what that is. It is not Star Wars. I can say.
Perfect. Okay.
And I am working on the 3rd Green Lama novel until my probably until on my dying day. What else am I working on? I'm very tired. Oh, and you can watch what I do for a living. Go to the Vanity Fair YouTube channel where you get to have interviews. Where I conduct interviews for Vanity Fair. One of my most recent videos was a set tour to Bridgerton. I think I've already mentioned. I got a few career timelines coming out. I did one with Josh Hartnett recently. Monica Bellucci is coming out soon. And I'm doing a video very soon next month that you are gonna love. I can't tell you what it is, but it's gonna be. I'm really excited about it. I'm so excited
I can
about
see
it,
this.
but
I love it.
I literally like I found out it was happening yesterday, and I just started screaming. I'm like, yes! I was like, I demanded this one, and I'm so happy about it. It's gonna be.
That's awesome.
I really hope it. I hope it lives up to my expectations. Hope it lives up to your expectations. But it is. Yeah. If it
All right,
goes the way I
cool.
want it to, it's gonna be great.
Fantastic. All right, well, we'll do what we can to get most of those notes into the show notes down below, so our listeners can check out more about what you've got coming and what you're doing and all that. And we also want to remind you guys that at this point, if you haven't already, that subscribing is the single most important thing you can do to help our show continue to grow. So click that little button down there, click the like and subscribe button, and that helps us get more amazing guests like Adam Lance Garcia here. We've had a great time with Adam, and it gives you funny moments to be able to listen to. So please subscribe and go check out Adam's work as well, because I know I will be, and I'm like I said, I've been stalking him for a while. I haven't checked out too much of his work, but knowing who he is, I'm pretty sure that's
I
going
mean,
to
I have
transfer
been.
over.
I have seen you driving behind me for a while, so it's you
I
finally
kept
caught
trying
me.
to duck. I kept trying to duck. But explains a couple of the car crashes. But anyway, guys, check out Adam's work as well. You will not be disappointed. And thank you again for tuning in. So on that note, goodbye.
Copyright 2024 FSF PopCast. Reference any specific product or entity mentioned on this podcast does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by FSF PopCast. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact us via email at info@fsfpopcast.com.